Good day to YouTube. Franco Pepe is widely regarded as the best pizza maker in the world and was featured in the Chef's Table series on Netflix, focusing on pizza, along with Chris Bianco of Arizona and the Crazy Bonchy of Rome. It was Franco Pepe's episode that caught my eye the most. His pizzas looked absolutely perfect and his attitude towards his craft inspiring. You could say that Franco is a pizza god. So obviously I wanted to try and make something that at least looked like his backwards margarita or margarita spagliata. In my experimentations and research, I also believe that I made a fairly decent approximation, but full disclaimer up front. I have never been to Pepe in Grani, I have never even been to Naples, and I've never tried the pizzas for myself. I'm going off visuals and descriptions from the series and descriptions from some of the pizza books that I own. If you've ever seen the show, you already know about the visuals. Let's explore the descriptions in said show along with some other pizzaioli. Roll on with the food. Ken Forkish, in his book The Elements of Pizza, describes Pepe's pizza as having a thin layer of crisp on the outside of a feathery, light crumb that tastes of lactic fermentation, which is the milky kind of bacteria. That it was also leopard spotted. Very important. Further, he mentions that the pizzas looked bready, but were ethereally light, and the dough was properly fermented and easily digested. Ken didn't outright say that the crust was the defining factor of his experience, but, you know, read between the lines and, well, read the lines themselves. I don't think it's anything less than unanimous that the dough is the most important part of the pizza, so that is where we'll start. I tried a brand new method for this video, for getting maximum spring and also pronouncing any leoparding of the crust, both of which can be pretty difficult to achieve in a home oven. So stick around towards the end of the video to see me demonstrate that. First, I'm going to run through the dough and why I made the decisions that I made adapting it for this particular style of pizza. In the show, we see Franco Pepe using quite a large amount of sourdough starter, so I upped the amount I used to 300 grams, or just about 30% of the dough weight. And what I'm making here is a sponge with the 300 grams of starter, 590 grams of water, and 1.4 grams of instant dry yeast. And really what I'm making here is a starter in a starter. I like to call this my super sponge. We're using 40% of the flour from the recipe with all of the water, and then whisking it all up vigorously to create some bubbles within it. Because the ratio of water to flour is so high, it speeds up the fermentation. We add 35 grams of sugar, 22 grams of diastatic malt, and 30 grams of vital wheat gluten to 660 grams of all-purpose flour, and then whisk it all together. This is going to provide a cover for the pre-ferment, or should I say pre-ferments, and make it all the more convenient to just mix together tomorrow. I like to make a little flat surface so I know exactly how much the mixture underneath it has risen, and then add the other half of the yeast on top. 1.4 grams of instant dry yeast, and then this whole mixture sits out at room temperature for 2 hours. Because so much of this formula is sitting out at room temperature for such a long time, it's going to produce a lot of the lactic acid fermentation that we're looking for. The type of bacteria that produces this thrives at anything over 50 degrees, but don't let it go past 78. I usually take these 2 hours to feed my boy Sauron, which is ideal because that's how long I want to leave him out to eat and produce his own lactobacillus. Check out my master dough videos on how to make a ridiculously easy starter of your own, but just to tell you the basics, I made a 90 gram poolish and just kept it alive. Then I put both the sponge and sauron into the fridge for 24 hours. This allows some of that acetic acid to catch up. Here you can see where the sponge underneath has started to rise, and it's time to mix it all up now. Just mix it with a spoon until it forms kind of a doughy consistency. And if you have a mixer, you can mix it in that. And if you don't, just do everything by hand, but do it for a few less minutes. Again, refer to my master dough videos for more detailed instructions on this element. As I used a mixture, I'm going to give you those instructions now. I mix everything together without the salt and oil from the recipe for about 6 minutes. Then I add the salt and oil and mix for another 6 minutes. Adding the salt and oil a few minutes after the initial mix is because these two ingredients really affect the structure of the dough. The salt strengthens it, but the oil shortens the gluten strands, creating more of a flaky texture. And then give it a cheeky little hand kneading before giving it a window pane test. If it stretches over a light sauce like this without breaking, it is good. If it doesn't, knead it some more. It then gets balled up and placed in an oiled bowl, covered and left at room temperature for 20 minutes. After which you will ball up 5 dough balls, place in your container of choice, and then they'll go back in the fridge for a further 24 hours. Ball the doughs up by pushing it against the palm of your hand to create a taut surface area. All in all, this entire procedure takes 48 hours, but the resulting dough is delicious and complex flavored. So merely going off what Franco said in the show, the main objective when preparing the basil and the tomatoes was to do bare minimum to them to really accentuate the inherent flavors of both. The best way to puree up basil for some basil oil is to use a mortar and pestle. Using a blender or even a knife can create bitterness in the basil, but the mortar and pestle kind of imitates tearing it manually by hand. It pulls the leaves apart rather than cuts them. In these shots you'll see me taking advantage of my basil plants before they finally kick the bucket. And the procedure is simple. You just keep adding basil to the mortar with some extra virgin oil and grinding it up. Simple as that. I did 2 full mortars worth of basil and then just transferred it to one of my lovely plastic squeezy bottles, making sure to saw off the very end of the nozzle so that any big chunks of basil would make their way out of the bottle. All these basil plants were on the last legs, so I just chose the very greenest leaves. I then poured a few more tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil into the bottle, and that's the basil done. The basil tastes sweet, and the extra virgin adds a lovely phenolic astringency to it. In keeping with the chef's table theme, I picked up a little can of Crispianco's tomatoes, both to test them out and also to provide a little bit of meta to the video. My preliminary opinion on these is that they're very savory, lots of umami. But the same thing with this, the same theme. To accentuate the natural flavors of the tomatoes, I simply just blitz these up and put them in one of my little squeezy bottles. No sugar, no puree, no herbs. The flavors will be further brought out when I finish the pizza and season it with some sea salt and fresh cracked pepper. I tried various methods for getting the cheese on top of the pizza to not be all wet and sloppy. But unfortunately, one of the limitations of a home oven is that that's really hard to avoid. In the video, you see Franco simply tearing up some buffalo mozzarella and sprinkling it with oil on top of the pizza. But every attempt I made to just do that resulted in a soggy wet pizza. In these shots, you see me on one of my first attempts, trying in vain to dry out the mozzarella with some paper towels and using some butter and garlic underneath it to try and provide a barrier. But it still didn't really work out that well. It was lovely and delicious and all that, but it took away from the crispiness of the bottom of the pizza, and certainly isn't anything like the pizza that Franco demonstrated in the show. So I'm going to show you what works best, as well as showing you my super steam method in the next chapter. So when we talk about leoparding on pizza, it refers to the little black dots that you see on wood-fired pizzas. And these and the pizza's initial rise are caused by water escaping from the dough. So to try and achieve this at home, I both raised the hydration level of the dough and I straight up put steam into the oven. I read about this hack in Bread on the Table by David Norman. It's a method that imitates commercial bread ovens that inject steam into the chamber right before adding the dough. All you need is some stainless steel scrubbing chains, a stainless steel funnel, a cast iron griddle, and of course a piece of steel. Put the steel in the griddle pan under the steel and preheat the oven to 550 for an hour. Your dough ball should have been resting at room temperature for a couple of hours anyways. Also, in order to help the pizza get that nice, big, fluffy initial spring on it, go super easy on the dough. Just lightly stretch it out whilst not touching the perimeter at all. You can use this technique here where you slightly stretch it with your closed fists. Between the steam, this delicate touching, and the extra 30 grams of water that I put into this dough, I feel like I'm getting close. The next step is to brush with extra virgin olive oil, grate some low moisture mozzarella, and some grated Parmigiano Reggiano. Those first 2 cheeses and the oil are what is going to help retain some dryness and crispiness on the dough that plain old fresh mozzarella just annihilates. Now it's time to put the steam in the oven. The water needs to be hot, so I just boil it in a kettle, measure it out in a little measuring cup, open the oven door just enough so that you can fit the funnel through the crack and into the griddle pan. Pour the water in there and get out of the way because it's going to steam your bloody face off. Something to note, only use a very high grade stainless steel scrubber. These can withstand a lot of heat. They won't corrode and become airborne. Other metals might do so and are very harmful. The way this technique works is it keeps the inside of the oven moist and allows the pizza to expand expand a little bit more before it takes its final shape, if you will. It also facilitates a little bit more steam bursting out of the pizza and creating those leopard spots. I always take the pizza out after a few minutes, brush it with oil and put it back in. Then it's time to simply just top it with the plain old pureed bianco tomato in these little stripes that Franco Pepe does on the show. Drizzle it with basil and then sprinkle some mild and sea salt, crack some pepper on it. Image. Let's do a crispy test. Look at that crumb. Look at her. Leopards. She's a leopard spotted ethereal beauty. I mean, obviously I won't know till I go to Naples. When I go to Naples, well, that's a pretty bloody good pizza. Look at it. I am going to assume there's an overwhelming majority of you that think I failed in recreating a Franco Pepe pizza. And I'm right there with you. What I made here is the closest I think you can get with a home oven. There's just some limitations that cannot be overcome, especially when it comes to the color of the crust. Instead of a nice malty brown, we get a saturated golden color, which, don't get me wrong, is still nice, it's just not the same. Then there's the using the low moisture mozzarella and grated parmesan underneath the fresh mozzarella to prevent a wet pizza. All in all, these limitations are simply due to not having a high enough heat oven, like they do in Naples. But I think that all of this is just as instructive as it would be if I achieved a full replication. And it results in a damn tasty pizza all the same. I now only make dough this way, and we eat this style of pizza all the time. Using bare bone ingredients to top the pie and increasing the hydration of the pizza and steam to get that big bubbly crust are all things I feel very happy about having in my arsenal. And I hope you add them to yours. Thanks for watching this. See you next time.